In the neon glow of 80s and 90s gaming, every corner of the pixelated world was brimming with monsters, shadows and unspeakable horrors, with gamers witnessing some of the scariest and most mysteriously fascinating titles to ever grace their screens. So join me on a journey as I peel back the layers of some of the darkest secrets of retro horror games, because sometimes even the things that lurk in the darkness might actually be behind you.
Right.
Yeah, I know, I couldn't help myself, but anyway, let's start with the game that started it all. Now, we can't talk about retro horror without starting with the legend itself, Resident Evil, the game that made survival horror a household name and defined an entire genre of gaming. But before the bioorganic weapons and before Chris and Jill's iconic voice acting, there was a strange twisting tale in the development behind this masterpiece of the 90s. It was at this time that Capcom didn't yet know it was about to revolutionize the gaming industry. The developers originally envisioned a more traditional action game, but the PlayStation's hardware limitations forced a particular shift. But instead of this being a setback, the team used these limitations creatively, drawing players into a game that made every corner feel dangerous and unknown. But here's a secret: even before the game is finished, Resident Evil was on the verge of cancellation many times, all because of a certain blue hedgehog. Next up, we move to the spine-chilling Fatal Frame, also known as Project Zero. At its core, Fatal Frame was a survival horror game that made you feel like you were the prey in a hunt, and your only weapon was capturing the ghosts in photographs. Some even claim that the development studio was actually haunted, with strange sounds, flickering lights, and that weird sense of being watched. Whether it was true, all I know, it was just an eerie coincidence. Now let's take a look at a game that perhaps flew under the radar for many gamers at the time. I'm of course referring to the legendary Clock Tower. In Clock Tower, the player controls Jennifer, a young woman trapped in an eerie mansion, being stalked by the terrifying Scissor Man. What set Clock Tower apart from other horror games of the time was the unpredictability. Scissor Man could appear at any time, anywhere, and without warning. What most players didn't realise at the time was that their game's development team had a rather controversial approach to its horror. The developers focused on creating an emotional reaction from the player, one that didn't rely solely on grotesque imagery or gory kills, but instead on pure anxiety. And while it was an unconventional horror game at the time, it has since gone on to become a cult classic. I mean, who doesn't love a good horror game?
Of course!
Before the likes of Resident Evil and Silent Hill took the crown, there was Alone in the Dark. Being released in 1992, Alone in the Dark wasn't just a precursor to Resident Evil, it was a visionary title that pushed the limits of what a horror game could achieve. It featured horrifying creatures that lurked in the shadows, ready to pounce at any moment. But it wasn't just the monsters that terrified players, it was the fact that they could appear at any time without warning. But behind the scenes, Alone in the Dark was a struggle. The developers were working with an extremely limited resource and had to get creative to make the game as atmospheric as it was.
Nice.
Now, there's no denying that these retro horror games have left their mark not only on the genre, but on the gaming world as a whole. They're not just titles that scared us, they're games that have fascinated us, inspired us, and kept us up at night thinking about the darker corners of gaming development. So next time you load up Alone in the Dark or even Resident Evil, just remember that you're not just facing monsters and ghouls, you're facing the twisted, sometimes disturbing history of how these games came to be. Some chilling tales indeed, but anyway, come back next time where I take a look at some of the horror games you need to play on Halloween. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.